Hi there and welcome to Understanding the Fundamentals of Pinia in Vue 3. It is the modern, lightweight and intuitive way to manage state in your Vue application. My name is Brugain and I will be your instructor for this video, and if you are new to the channel, make sure you subscribe to the channel, that way you are always notified of the new content. Let me switch back to the main topic. If you have worked before with Vue application and state in the older version, you will be familiar with something called as Vuex, and that was the state management before, which was extremely powerful, but also it was a bit complex and verbose. Well, meet Pinia, the official state management library for Vue 3. It is simpler, more modular, and built to take full advantage of the composition API. This will be a quick introduction of Pinia and how you can use Pinia state management and how you can interact with Pinia state management. We will see how to set up and structure a Pinia store, what are some of the best practices for state, getters and action, and using Pinia with composition API, and also if you have multiple routes in the application, how does the state stays consistent? By the end of this tutorial, you will have a rock-solid understanding of how to use Pinia to manage your application state. Let me get started with that from the next video. In order to get started with Pinia, let me open a folder here, desktop, and create a folder. I will call that Pinia demo. Perfect. Now here we need to create a Vue project. Now here we will run the command npm create Vue at latest to create our project. We will give our project name Pinia demo and package name, that's okay. No to TypeScript, no to JSX support. Then where we have Vue router, we will do yes there because we want to add multiple routes and we want to see how state management happens between multiple pages or component. We will say yes for the Pinia state management here and no for the unit testing or ESLint. Perfect. Now we will navigate to Pinia demo and run the command npm install. Perfect, the installation is done here. Next I want to run the command npm run dev to run the project. Let me assign that side by side here. Perfect. And now before we continue, let me do some cleanup because I want to start from scratch. For that we will delete all the components. We do not want that. And we have a store. I will delete that as well. Perfect. Views, I will delete that. And we have the main router here. I will leave that. Assets, I will delete that as well. Perfect. Now in main.js, we do not want the CSS. Let me remove everything related to Pinia here. We will start from ground zero. The only thing I have left there is the router, and that is okay. Where we have the app.view here, let me remove the nav link. I do not want that. And I will display hello world right now. No image here. The router view, that is okay. Let me leave that here. We do not have the component. Let me delete that. Perfect. Everything is empty here. Let me remove all the styles here. That is not needed. Perfect. Let me press F12 here. We have an error here with the home view, and I believe that is because of the router here. But we need to create two components to basically display or toggle some things. What I will do is I will create in the src folder a folder for components here, and inside there I will add a new file. I will call that home.view. That will be the home page, and the new file will be info.view. Let me add a template here. I will display info, and in the home right now I will display home. Perfect. Now I will configure the routes here in router index.js. I will import home here and let me import info. The default one here will be home. That is perfect. The component, perfect. Next we will have info. Name will be info and component will be info. If I save that here, perfect, we have hello world and home, and that is because right here in the header we have hello world and then we have the router view. In the next video, let me add Bootstrap and let me add a navigation for our header. I want to add Bootstrap in the project before we move forward, so we will go to getbootstrap.com. The version I'm using is 5.3. Let me copy the link and I will add that in index here. Let me paste that and I will also copy the JavaScript here. Perfect. Whoops, I added that here. Let me add it right here and perfect. With that we have added Bootstrap in the project, but if you remember we have the light and dark theme. Let me use the dark theme, and for that we will go to index where we have the body. We will add property data PS theme. That will be dark. If I save that here, perfect, that looks good. Before we continue here, let me go to the main component here, that is app, and there I will add a div. Give it a class of text center, padding top 3, green color will be text success, and age 3. We will give it a heading of Countopedia. Let me add a new line here. After that I will add a div, give it a class of row, and there I want to add 2 buttons. We will basically add a router link to navigate to different components that we have, which is home and info. So here I will add a div, give it a class of column 4, offset that by 1 here, and in there I will add route will be for home page, and then let me add some classes here, form control, make it a badge, rounded bill, and text bg warning with padding 4. Within the router link we will display home, and if I save that and I have zoomed in, let me zoom out, that is great. Let me copy this again here, paste it one more time. That will be info. When we have info here, we will have to change the route, and if we click on that, perfect, you can see the navigation is working as expected. Now we want to see Pinia in action, but for that we will have to add Pinia to our project. Now I know initially when we created the project I said yes to Pinia, but then I deleted everything because I wanted to start fresh and show you how we can add that in your main.js. In order to add Pinia in our project here, we will write import and then we will import create Pinia from Pinia. We did not have to install a separate package for Pinia because we selected that, but if I examine package.json, you can see we have that dependency right here. So it is automatically installed because we selected yes when we created the project, but we will have to add that to our main.js. Once you add that here, where you have application where it is adding the router here, we will also have to add app.use, and there you can directly call the create Pinia, or you can have a constant here. I will call that Pinia, where we will create an instance of create Pinia, and then on the app here we will say app.use, and we want to add Pinia. That way we have configured our application to use Pinia. Now this is the basic configuration that is needed. But once you have this configuration, now you can create something called as stores in Pinia, where you will manage all the data, and that is where you will have all the state for your application. We have added Pinia in our application and we have configured our app to use that. Next, we need to create a store where we will have all the data. Typical convention is to create a folder and I will call that store where we will create all the stores for our application. Now there can be multiple Pinia stores in an application. So it is a recommended approach to name your store according to the component that you are building or what data will that store possess. This particular store will have information about a game that we will be building, so I will call that gamestore.js. If it was on a product, you would have called it productstore.js. If it was on an order, you could have called it accordingly. Now inside the store here, we first have to import a method define store from Pinia. Using that method, we will define a store that will be used in the application. We have to export that constant, so we will say export constant and we will give it a name of use game store. On here we will call the method define store and there we will have an object. One thing that I would like to point out is when you are using the naming convention here and you export that, the name here will always start with use and then whatever you want to call your store here and it will end in store. And then when we call the method define store, it expects two things. One is an object on what you want in that store, but before that we will have to give the store a unique ID or a unique name. Let me call this one as game store and then what we want in the store goes into the object. One of the most basic thing that goes in a store is state and that is where you will have the data for this particular store that you have created. We will also add more things in the store as we progress with the video, but this is where we start and here we will write inside state what is the multiple data or objects that we want to track in this particular store. Right now we are building a counter game application. So here what we will do is we will have a round bracket and in the object here we will have a variable. Score will be 0 by default and then we have max health. I will set that to be 100. Then maximum attack can be of 30 points and maximum defense can be 10 points. With that we have created a store with the name of game store or that is the ID that we will use to access this particular store and that store has a state which has 4 properties. Now that we have a store that can be shared across all the components in our application, before we do that, let me go to the app component and where we have the home page, let me do some designing. That is in home.view. Perfect. So right here, let me add a div and I will give it a class of text center here. Close that. Within that div, I will add a p tag and let me write let's play the game. Then if you remember in our store, we have two things. We have the score and then we will have max health. If they reach max health here, they will win the game. So here let me display that in an h2, give it a class of text primary and padding bottom 3. We will display current score and I will add a span here, give it a class of text primary again, padding bottom 3. We will display maximum score. Let me save that here and perfect, that is good. Let me add a line here and I will add a div, give it a class of row and there we will have buttons to play the game. So right here we will add 2 buttons, but I will add that inside div, class of column 2 and offset 3. Let me add a button. Class will be form control here, btn success for the green color and padding 5. I will call it increment here and let me save that. Well, the design is looking a bit off here. Let me make it offset of 1 and column 4. And column 5 here and padding 4. Perfect. That looks good here. Let me copy and paste that here. We will have decrement and that will be danger. Save that here. Well, I will remove the offset. Perfect. After that, I will add one more button that will be random here and it will be column 6 offset by 3. I will add padding top of 2 and let me make it warning. Perfect. With that we have a basic template for the home page here, but now we want to use our store to display the current score and max counter. Now we want to display the current score and maximum score based on what we have in our state right here. For that we will have to import this particular store in our component. When we have to import a store in our component, we do not import them using the ID that we give to our store. We import that using the export name that we have given here, that is the use game store. So if I go to the home.view here, let me add script, add setup there, and there we will import. Let me copy the name to avoid any spelling mistake, use game store from, and we have the store and then game store. Once we import that, then we will create a constant here, call that game store, and there we will create an instance of the use game store. Now once this is accessible here, we can display the current score and we can use directly as if the store properties are available in this particular component using the constant game store. So here we can say game store dot, and what is the property name? We have score. Let me add that. And here for the max health, we will say game store dot, and we have max health. If I save that here, error here, something is not right, and the folder name is store, not stores. Save that, and perfect. Now if I press F12, you will see a different error message here, and you can see cannot read properties of undefined score. The reason is if you examine the case, that is different. View is case sensitive with that, so we need to make sure that it matches. And let me save that. Perfect. We should not see any error message, and we see a console log, game store was installed. So that is great. We have the current score and we have the max score here. If I update this to be 50 and if I refresh that, perfect. So with that you can see how easy it was to get started with a store and how to easily consume that store or use the properties of that store in any component. Now what if we want to update the values that are stored inside the Pinia store? In the home here we have accessed our store here and we can create function to directly toggle properties. Like we have the increment, decrement and random. Let me create function for that. I will call it increment here, where we want to access the game store.score and increment that randomly. I will say game store.score. We can directly access that. We do not need any dot value or anything like that. And I will say plus equal to math.floor. And I will do math.random into 30 plus 1. Perfect. That way it will get a random value from 1 to 30 and it will increment that. Let me copy and paste decrement here. Let me get a value between 1 and 10. Finally, we have a random. Where we want to be random, it can either increment or decrement. I will say math.random. If that is greater than 0.5, then we will call increment, else we will call decrement. We can call all of these methods in our buttons here. Let me add a click event. And here we will call random. Next, let me copy that. We have decrement and we have increment. Let me use that. And perfect. That should be good. With that, if I call increment here, you can see the score increases, and that is perfect. If I call decrement, it is not decrementing, it is increasing because we need minus equal to. Let me save and refresh that. And now if I call decrement here, perfect. If I call increment, that is working. Let me try random here. That called the increment. Let me try again, and it decreases. So our random is also working here, and with that our buttons are functional now, and we are basically updating the state that is there in our game store. In Pinia, if we want to get values, we can also implement something called as getters, and getters are similar to computed properties for the state of a store. Let me walk you through an example of that here. I will go back to the game store, and here inside our store, after the state, we can implement something called as getters. As the name implies here, getters are useful to retrieve or fetch some value. So they will always return something. Let me add a getter here to get the current score, and that will return this dot score. When we are inside getter here and we want to access something in the state, we need to use this keyword. But with that, it will retrieve the current score. And now if I go to home here, where we have the score, rather than that, we can directly use our getter and paste that. Now when we are using getter, we do not have to add the function here. If you do that, you will notice it does not work and you will have a console error. Getters are directly accessible like a variable without the round bracket, and that did not work. Let me see here. I had to refresh that, and that works. Then what we can do is if I scroll down, the method for increment or decrement or attack or defense, let's say that is not dependent on this particular component, but it depends on the store. Like if you have other component where you want to implement same logic, then you will have to copy this and paste it again there. Rather than that, you can move this logic inside the store itself. In getter here, we can say get next attack here. Inside there, I will do console.log here. Let me log the attack here. And here, let me add a variable attack is equal to math.floor.random. We will multiply that by the maximum attack that we have here. And let me increment that by 1. I will log that attack here. Let me remove this one. And then we will return attack. That will give us the value for next attack. I will have to copy that to add another getter for next defense here. There we will have the max defense here. And I will log that here. Perfect. The variable name, let me modify that to be defense. And perfect. And perfect. That is great. If I go back to my home here, now in the increment or decrement where we have plus equal to, we will do that by game store dot and we have get next attack. We have game store dot and get next defense. Let me copy that to avoid any spelling mistake. And that looks good. Now with that, I will show you one problem. Let me refresh the application and examine the logs here. And let me increment. Perfect, we have an attack of 19. Let me decrement. We have a defense of 2. But if I hit increment again, you will notice it does not log, but it is incrementing the value. If you decrement here, you will notice every time it will decrement with whatever value we have logged here. Since we have defense of 2, when we decrement, it always decrements by 2. The reason behind that is getters are cached by default. If you notice here, it is dependent on max attack and max defense, and that is not getting updated, so it does not feel that it has to recalculate something. It gives the last calculated value because it is cached in memory. So that will not work in our situation, because now if we increment or decrement, it is always incrementing or decrementing with the cached value. Now we can see that getters are cached because the value of the store that is being tracked is not updated. Now one hacky way to work around with this is, rather than get next attack, we can call that set next attack and set next defense. And then what we can do here is, when we are returning, we can access our this.score, increment the attack, and here we will say this.score and decrement the defense. Then if we go to app.view, we will not do minus equal to or plus equal to, we will directly assign that. This will be set. Perfect. With that, if I save and if I refresh here, and if I do decrement, the defense first time it decrements by 8, but if I click again, you can see it is called. So that is functional along with increment, and it is working. Now one disadvantage that we have here is, if I go to game store here, and if I directly want to update the score, I can directly do that. But even if I do that, I have to return something back here, or else getters will not work. So getters should be used when you want to return something or get some data. But if that is not the case, and if you just want to update some data, then we have actions in Pinia. Similar to the getters here, I can add a comma here, and then we have actions. In actions, we can cut both of these endpoints here and paste that here, and rather than returning, we can say this.score plus equal to attack and this.score minus equal to defense. With that, we do not have to return anything here. But now how will we use the actions here in our component? Actions are basically function here, so we will invoke that like a function, and that should be it. Perfect. We do not have to do anything else here. If I save that and if I refresh here, we have increment. We have an error here where it says the set next attack is not a function. Let me go back, and of course it will be actions here and not action. If you make a spelling mistake, things will not work. If I try increment again, perfect. It attacks by 23 and updates the score. If I do that again, it is functional. If I do decrement here, perfect. That is also working. Let me refresh here and do random. We have a defense. Next we have an attack, and that is perfect. We are getting the random attack or defense here, and everything is looking great with actions. To summarize again, getters are basically computed props in a component, and purpose is to return a computed value based on the store's current state. And actions are similar to methods in your component or function, but their main purpose is to mutate the store's data instead of a component's local data. Now let me add the logic here that if your score reaches 100, you won the game. In the home here, if I go up where we have the max score, let me add a span here, give it class of text success, and padding bottom 3, age 3. Here we will display you won, but that will be displayed on the if condition if game store dot get score is greater than 100. Where we are displaying all the buttons here, let me add the same if condition. It will be opposite here, less than 100, and this will be greater than equal to. Perfect. Now I will add a VElse here, div VElse, In the else condition, I want to add a button to reset the game here. And there we need to add something in the store to make sure that we update that to 0. Now we can directly do that as well here. We already have access to this particular property that is score, and we can make that 0. Or what we can do is here we can add something called as reset score, and that will update the score to be 50 again. If I go back here, let me invoke that. I will add a click event. On the click here, we have game store, and there we have added a getter here. Let me call that. Now if you call that, and if I refresh here, and now if I increment, perfect. We can see U1 here when it became 108, and then if I click reset game, everything is working as expected. But if you take a look at what you have done is you have added a getter here that is updating a value. Now even though you can do that, I do not like to go with this route because getters are simple. They should be returning some data and they should be used to fetch some data. We are not doing that here, so why not we add that in the action here? Let me do that, reset score, and then right here where we have this, we will invoke the function. If you save that here and try it again, that works as well. But this is more meaningful because now you have isolated the responsibility of getters to fetch some data, and actions will be there to update some data. And that is one of the best practices that you should follow along as well. Now in the home here, let's say if the score decreases below 0, then we can display you lost. So here, let me add a span, and I will say if score is less than 0, we will display you lost here. Perfect. That is great. And in the if here, we will have to add an AND condition. Well, it will be an OR condition, or game store.score is less than 0. If I save that and if I do decrement here, and perfect, we have the you lost here, but the buttons are being displayed. Well, this will be an AND condition, and the score needs to be greater than 0. So if it is between 0 and 100, only then we will display the buttons. If I save that, perfect, we have reset game here. If I decrement again, and perfect, that is working. If you notice, we have two components here, home and info. And when we are using the state here, we are using that in the home component, but we can share the state across component, and that is the power of Pinia. In order to see that, let me go to the info tab here, open that, and in the template, I will add some information here. This is an info page. I can add some dummy text there that this is a simple game where you can increment, decrement, or randomize the score. The score starts at 50 and you can win by reaching 100. Now the 100 that we have here, that is the max health that is there in the game store. We can retrieve that and then we can display that as well. Let me add a getter for that. I will call that get winning score here. And there we will just return this dot max health. Perfect. Now if we want to access that in this component, we will have to use script here. Let me add the setup keyword, and there we will have to import use game store from the location. Then we need to create a constant for game store and create an instance of the use game store. Now we can access the Pinia store in this component as well. What I will do is right here I will display game store dot what is the getter, get winning score, save that here. We do not see that here. Let me refresh, and that is working. Now let's say I want to add an input tag here where I will dynamically toggle the get winning score. You cannot change the getter here if you try that, and if you try to toggle that, you will see it does not work. In the console, we will see the exception that set is not defined, and that does not work. When we have to toggle here, we will have to toggle the state, that is score. Let me do that. And now if I refresh here, well, it will not be score, it will be max health. Whoops. Max health, save that. Perfect. Now if I make it 1000 here, it updates. But the main thing here is if you go to home, that is updated here as well. If you go to info and make it 150, you can see across components, the Pinia store is shared across the component, and now we have 150. If I increment that, things will still not work because right here we have hard coded the values. I will have to update that to be gamestore.maxHealth. Let me do that. Perfect, I believe it should work now. If I refresh here, update this to be 120. Let me increment here. Great. On 115 we did not win, but if I do increment again, we won that because the maximum score is 120. So with that you can see if you add a new component or if you have a grandchild component, you do not have to use inject or provide or anything like that. You can directly create a Pinia store and add that on the component where you want to consume the data. Our application is coming along great here and everything is functional in our Pinia store. But one thing that I want to modify here is the style that we have of our Pinia store. In Vue, we have two types of styling. We have Composition API and we have Options API. The style that we are using right now resembles close to the Options API, but Composition API is what we have used throughout the course, and that is the go-to standard moving forward as well, because it is more organized and you do not have to define action, getters or state. So how can we convert this particular store here to Composition API? Well, that is super simple. Where we have the game store here, this will be an arrow function, and there we will not have state. We will have all the constant. So this will be const here. Let me copy and paste that for all of them here. And we will have to initialize them. So that will be ref. I will have to import that as well. Import, we will import ref and computed properties. Let me add a comma from view. Perfect. Now let me define the state here. We will have score. That is good. Max health will be a ref of 100. Then we have a max attack. That will be ref of 30 here. And max defense will be a ref of 10. Then we have the getters here, and getters will be computed property. Let me remove the getters, we do not need to define that here, and directly we will add computed properties. That will be a constant get store, and we will make this a computed property is equal to, we have computed, and then we will have a round bracket here, function, and how do we want to calculate that? We want to return the score dot value. Let me return that, and we will not have to use this keyword that we were using before. That is great for the computed property. Let me copy that for the get winning score here, add that here, and here we will return max health dot value. Perfect. So our state and our getters are looking great. It will not be a comma here, it will be semicolon. Let me update and save that. Then finally, where we have the action, I will convert them to be an arrow function. Perfect. Let me make that change here. And we have the reset score. And perfect. That is great. Now one thing that we will have to modify here is after we have the reset score here, all of this will be semicolon here, and then we will have to return all of these back. Similar to what we do in other JavaScript functions, we will have to return them, and only then they will be accessible outside of our game store. If you do not return them, then they will not be accessible. We will have score, max health, max attack, max defense. Then we have the get score, get winning score, and we have the action, that is the set next attack. We have one for the defense, and we have reset score. In the reset score, we will not need this dot score, it will be score dot value. Wherever we have this dot score, let me replace that with score dot value. And where we have this dot max attack, we will not require this keyword anymore. It will be dot value here, and perfect. Now here it will not be a comma, this will be a semicolon. Let me make sure. That looks good here, and I do not need this. I will remove that one, and perfect. This is looking great. With that, you can see how easily we were able to transition from option API style in our Pinia store to composition API, and this is the preferred approach because now everything is much cleaner. If you want to explicitly define that this is a state, you can do that. These are getters, and what we have here are action. If you save that, and if I navigate back to the application, increment is working, decrement is working, and the alert goes away pretty spontaneously. There we go, we have the reset, and if I do random, go to info, we have winning score of 1000. If I go back, now it is 1000. So everything is working as expected. All we did is we updated the styling from option API to composition API in Pinia store. I hope you guys have enjoyed the video. Now if you want to build a real-world application using Firebase database authentication using Vue, I have a complete course on that on .NETmastery.com. That being said, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like the video and leave a comment, and I will see you guys in some other video.